Dallas, late 70s, oil prices soared, banks flung their doors open, and glass towers seemed to sprout overnight. Republic Bank Plaza, Thanksgiving Tower, Reunion Tower, all symbols of a city on the make. This was a time when Highland Park lawns glistened, Swiss Avenue's mansions clung to legacy, and land deals outpaced reason. You could walk into Neiman Marcus or catch a Friday night under Texas Stadium's famous hole in the roof, believing the good times would never end. But beneath the optimism, something was brewing. Lines of prosperity and neglect were drawing sharper. Crises were waiting in the wings. What did Dallas really look like before everything changed? The story isn't what you remember. Highland Park always felt set apart, with its winding roads and Spanish colonial mansions tucked behind thick hedges. University Park offered the same sense of insulation, good schools, manicured lawns, and a shopping center built back in 1931, where the same families seemed to browse every Saturday. Zoning rules kept out the noise and the high-rises, preserving a world that seemed untouched by the city's wild growth. Just a few miles away, Swiss Avenue told a different story. By the early 1970s, the old estates were threatened by developers eager to cash in on the boom. In September 1973, neighbors gathered signatures and convinced the city to make Swiss Avenue Dallas's first historic district, blocking demolition and keeping the block's grandeur from the 1920s intact. That same year, preservationists like Lynn and Virginia Savage fought to keep their street from turning into another casualty of progress, with city leaders like Adeline Harrison backing them up. Meanwhile, Fair Park's Art Deco halls still anchored the east side, hosting the state fair each fall, but the blocks around it showed the scars of disinvestment, boarded-up shops, empty lots, and faded paint, hinting at a city where prosperity and neglect ran side by side. Downtown Dallas in the late 70s and early 80s felt like a city showing off its new money. Oil prices shot up, and with every spike, another tower seemed to rise. Republic Bank Plaza, all sharp glass and steel, reached 60 stories in 1984, its green-lit crown visible for miles. Thanksgiving Tower joined the skyline in 1982, promising a future where anything seemed possible. Reunion Tower, with its glowing ball perched above the Hyatt, opened in 1978 and quickly became the city's unofficial lighthouse. These weren't just office buildings, they were monuments to a cash rush fueled by petrodollars and banking deregulation. The depository institutions, deregulation and monetary control, Act of 1980 let Dallas banks chase bigger deals, and by the mid-1980s, land was flipping so fast that fortunes were made and lost overnight. You could step onto Elm Street and feel the ambition in the air, cranes swinging steel above the old storefronts. Money wasn't just moving through Dallas, it was being made visible, one story at a time. This was a time when Dallas didn't just build fortunes, it built places to spend them. NorthPark Center opened its doors in October 1965, and suddenly shopping felt like a special occasion. You could wander polished terrazzo floors past Neiman Marcus, Saks, and Yoski's, the air sweet with perfume samples and the hum of well-heeled crowds. NorthPark wasn't just a mall, it was a parade of Cadillac tail fins and Sunday dresses, a place where teenagers dreamed over window displays and oilmen's wives compared handbags. The ads promised glamour, and for many it delivered a climate-controlled escape from the Texas heat, where a new pair of Ferragamos or a slice of Neiman Marcus chocolate cake could make you feel like you'd arrived. Just a few miles away, Love Field ruled the skies. Before DFW changed the map, every big deal and family vacation started at that airport. In the late 1960s, Love Field was one of the busiest in the country. Jet engines roaring over Lemon Avenue, Braniff and American jets lined up on the tarmac. You could spot business travelers in Stetsons and stewardesses in Muid uniforms, all moving through a terminal that felt more like a social club than a transit hub. This was a city on the move, where money and mobility went hand in hand, and every Saturday could end with a shopping bag in one hand and a boarding pass in the other. Texas Stadium opened its doors in 1971, and from the very first kickoff, it felt like Dallas had built a temple. People still talk about that hole in the roof, supposedly so God could watch his favorite team play. On Sundays, traffic snaked through Irving, and you could spot families in star-covered jackets and little boys clutching Roger Staubach jerseys, all streaming toward the stadium's concrete bowl. That place wasn't just for football. It was a weekly pilgrimage, a place where the city's worries fell away, and strangers high-fived in the aisles. When Tom Landry's Cowboys won Super Bowl VI in 1972 and again in 1978, the whole city seemed to glow. The Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders, with their white boots and blue stars, became icons in their own right. Suddenly, every little girl wanted to join their ranks. High school football fields echoed the same rituals on Friday nights, bands blaring and crowds roaring under the lights. For a while, it felt like the whole city moved in rhythm with the Cowboys, unified under that star, believing that anything was possible. In April 1978, Dallas found itself beamed into living rooms around the world, all thanks to a primetime soap called Dallas. Suddenly, the city's oil men and socialites were not just local legends, they were international celebrities, with J.R. Ewing's Smirk and South Fork Ranch's white fences standing in for the whole city. The show's blend of greed, glamour, and backstabbing turned real estate deals into high drama and made the phrase, "Who shot J.R.?" a national obsession. By November 1980, 83 million Americans tuned in to watch the answer, a number that made even the Super Bowl look modest. Tourists started flocking to Parker, Texas, hoping to catch a glimpse of the real South Fork, snapping photos by the front gate and buying Stetsons in the gift shop. For a few years, Dallas was less a place than a brand. Oil, power, and wide-open ambition, all wrapped up in a weekly cliffhanger. The city leaned into it, too. You could spot J.R. lookalikes at charity balls, and local boosters happily played up the myth. It did not matter if the real Dallas was more complicated. The world wanted the fantasy, and for a while the city was happy to play along. This was a time when Dallas nights buzzed with possibility, and the weekend meant slipping into a world of neon, music, and smoky flavors. Deep Ellum was still raw and electric, its brick warehouses echoing with blues and punk, places like Mother Blues on Lemon Avenue, where you might catch a guitarist pouring heartbreak into every note. The air along Elm Street carried the scent of barbecue and beer, and you could wander from club to club, never knowing if you would find a local legend or a band just passing through. On Maple Avenue, the Swinger drew a cowboy crowd, two-stepping under strings of lights, while Greenville Avenue's bars promised happy hour that stretched deep into the night. You could start your evening with a window shopping stroll at Neiman Marcus downtown, the flagship since 1907, where the perfume counter felt as exclusive as a private club. NorthPark Center, opened in 1965, turned shopping into theater, polished floors, designer bags, and the hum of ambition in every corridor. But most Dallas cravings landed somewhere between Tex-Mex and barbecue. El Phoenix dished out enchiladas and margaritas, while Sonny Bryan's on Inwood Road offered brisket so tender it fell apart at your touch. Every October, the state fair drew crowds to Fair Park, where Big Tex, towering since 1952, greeted families and Fletcher's corny dogs became a rite of passage. This was a city that played as hard as it worked, where the taste of salsa, the thump of a bass drum, and the glow of downtown lights stitched together the memory of a weekend out. Out on the edge of the city, the LBJ Freeway and Central Expressway turned old farmland into a checkerboard of subdivisions and shopping strips. You could drive from Lake Highlands to Plano in half an hour, passing new schools and gas stations that seemed to spring up overnight. When DFW Airport opened on January 13, 1974, it felt like Dallas had landed on the world stage. Suddenly, you could catch a flight to London or Los Angeles without ever touching Love Field. By the early 80s, the car was king, and the morning commute became a fact of life. In 1983, voters approved DART, hoping to catch up with the sprawl, but the city's heart still beat to the rhythm of engines and rush hour. This was a time when the city's confidence felt unbreakable, but the cracks were already showing. You could drive through South Dallas and see the difference, with shuttered banks, empty lots, and families who had watched their savings disappear when Vernon Savings and Loan went under in 1987. The headlines talked about fraud and billion-dollar bailouts, but for a lot of people it just meant jobs lost and homes gone. In these same years, Dallas became the unlikely backdrop for Roe versus Wade, filed in a county courthouse in 1970 and decided by the Supreme Court in 1973, turning a local struggle into a national flashpoint. Segregation still shaped daily life, with redlining and zoning keeping Black and Latino families boxed into neighborhoods that bore the brunt of disinvestment and pollution. One resident remembers the air near Fair Park, thick with the smell of industry and the feeling that the boom never quite reached their block. By the end of the decade, more than 100,000 jobs had vanished across Dallas-Fort Worth. For every story of new towers and stadiums, there was another of a family left behind, wondering when the swagger would run out. After the towers emptied and the oil money dried up, new dreams took root on old prairie land north of town. By the early 90s, telecom firms and software startups filled offices along the Central Corridor, and people started calling it the Silicon Prairie. A city planner remembers those first fiber lines going in, the sense that Dallas could reinvent itself, again, by betting on ideas instead of oil. The skyline stayed, but the story behind it was already changing. You can still see old Dallas in the neon of Keller's, the curve of Swiss Avenue, the ghosts of commerce in Reunion Tower's shadow. Today, tech replaces oil, glass towers rise again, but the city's divides run just as deep. What we remember and what we ignore still shapes Dallas.